on live countdown.
I know.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Leigh Miller, Senior Customer Talent Advisor at GEM, and thanks for joining us today for 2026 Planning, Expert Insights, and Proven Strategies. So planning season is here, and if you're like most TA leaders I work with, you're somewhere between confidently prepared and frantically updating last year's spreadsheet at the stroke of midnight. The difference between leaders who consistently get their plans approved and those who don't is they're not guessing. They're using specific frameworks to build business cases that position TA as strategic and not a cost center. So today I am joined by two incredible leaders who've been in the hot seat and know exactly what works. Hebba Youssef, founder and creator of I Hate It Here and Chief People Officer at Workweek, and Renee Pires, People Strategy and Enablement at Stripe. So today we are going to dig into the frameworks that secure budget, the conversations that need to happen before decisions are made, and the practical strategies that will position you as a strategic business partner heading into 2026. So let's start by having each of you briefly introduce yourselves and share a bit about your planning season experience. Hebba, let's start with you.
I am Hebba Youssef. When I'm not creating content for I Hate It Here, I am still the Chief People Officer at a Series A startup with about 55 employees. It's been growing. I've been there about 3 years. And we have done a lot of interesting things around planning. This is my 4th startup. So I like to joke that nobody really does planning well. Like I found nobody knows how to do anything when it comes to planning, and it gets really kind of scary. I've also worked at bigger companies where I think planning has followed a very structured approach. I think as I'm walking into my 2026 planning season, I actually prefer a more flexible quarter by quarter approach because I think we can actually better serve the business at the moment it's in if I have that flexibility of like a quarter by quarter approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm keen to hear more about the quarter by quarter approach. Welcome and thank you for being here. And Renee, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Renee. I'm so delighted and excited to be here. So just wanted to thank you all for having me. My background is in strategy and operations, mostly related to the planning space. So I have a lot of experience with the planning process and playing different roles as well, whether it's been designing, shaping, and then managing the rollout of a planning process for an organization, or developing a plan for, in partnership with leaders for their organization. So I've touched planning in many different ways, shapes, and forms. And so I'm just very excited to be here and have some dedicated space and time to chat through kind of what's gone well, what hasn't gone so well, and just share and learn together.
Excellent. Sounds like we have a planning expert on the panel. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. All right, we have a number of topics to explore, and already I have questions that are bubbling up. But for the audience, if you do have questions as we are going through this conversation, please feel free to drop that in the chat. We'll leave 15 minutes at the end. And if possible, if we can weave that in through the conversation, we will as well. But let's start by taking a quick poll to understand who is in the audience today. So you should have just seen a quick pop-up. If you go to the polls tab, and you will see the question, how many times have you led or participated in an annual planning cycle for TA? This will be my first, 1 to 2 cycles, 3 to 5, or more than 5. I could write the playbook. When you're ready, select yours and submit. And we will see the answers trickling through. Okay. How did we do here? And the answers have come through. Okay, so we have 50% of the audience. This will be my first. 1 to 2 cycles, 15%, and then a number of you, 3 to 5. Excellent. Well, we're hoping that this conversation today will speak to a range of folks in the audience. So if this is new, great. We've got some really tactical strategies and advice to support you. And if you are one of the experts who have done it more than 5 times, please feel free, as I said, to drop in the chat and help the conversation along. All right, ladies, are we ready to get into it?
Ready.
Let's do this. Let's
Do
do
it.
this. All right. So let's start off with a bit of a reality check. When it
Hmm.
comes to annual planning, what's the biggest mistake you see TA leaders make? And what should they be doing differently to get their plans approved and prioritized? Renee, I'll pass this one over to you to kick us off.
All right. So this is a great question. I think one of the first thing that comes to mind for me in my experience has been um, communicating the amount of runway and lead time that's needed to get recruiters in seat and ready to go at the start of the year, like to kick off with hiring and executing on those plans. And so that's, I think, that one just came to mind first for me. Hebba, I'm curious what your thoughts are here. But I think that one is a big one. And I think recruiting leaders know this and are aware of this, but it's the communication piece of communicating that to the business and getting the business to really understand, and especially the amount of time it takes outside the US. I think there's a lot more, often more runway needed then. But Heb, I'm curious what you think.
I have definitely been in the spot where they're like, we're going to hire 50 engineers this year. And I'm like, I have 2 recruiters. How am I going to do that? Like, how did a plan get all the
Right.
way to me before someone was like, hey, can we actually where's the resource management in all of this? I've experienced that. So I've been a part of that mistake. I think one of the other mistakes I see TA teams make is not pushing back on the asks enough. Like by the time something gets approved, I would hope that the TA leaders in the room being like, but why do we need this hire? But why is this happening? Like, can we augment in a certain way? Can we use a tool before we jump to a hire? I see so many people default to, we'll just throw bodies at the problem. And then all of those asks end up coming to TA. And a lot of times TA is wondering, like, do we really need that hire? Like, it feels like there are 5 burning other things that are happening. Like, why am I hiring yet another accountant? It doesn't seem like that's what we need right now. And so that is a mistake I see made a lot. Like by the time it passes the planning stage and gets to TA, I still think there's like flexibility to ask why. I would rather TA be in the room when the plan is being made before it's handed to them and asked to execute on it.
And Hebba, are you suggesting there that it's even when the plan comes to you and it's kind of pretty much baked, there's still the opportunity to ask the why?
Of course.
Yeah.
Sometimes my CEO likes to write JDs when has free time. And so he'll like give me the JDs. It's like how he processes his thoughts as he thinks about people and roles. And I usually go back and we end up having like a longer conversation about like the business, the timing, the need, the team, the resourcing. And he's already done the JD work, but we still are talking about, do we need this hire? And so I think it's interesting to see a lot of people like go into planning season with like a lot of really great thoughts and intent. And then when the plan gets handed to everybody else, it's like, wait a minute, we should have asked a lot more questions before this plan got made.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from both of you, it's the timeline and giving you all enough runway to be able to have all of these discussions, and then the communication piece, being able to really have the deep discussions and to push back or to ask the why around it.
The one thing I'd add, Leigh, is I think another challenge or mistake is feeling like you need to have all of the specific details, like the specifics of the level, the role, the location, all of that in place to begin hiring. I think what I've seen work well is you can get some early indicator signal of where the business wants to grow or where they, right? And you don't need to have all of those specifics yet. Like, I think that just getting the high level signal can help you can help recruiting kind of get their team's kind of initial signal on where to set up and you might need to hire. And then you can get some of that fidelity and that higher fidelity later on in the process. But, I think waiting, like you'll run out of time if you wait till you get that level of detail.
So just start and have those conversations and bring people around on the journey, and then continue to kind of refine it and add more detail.
Yes.
Yeah, love that. I haven't actually heard that perspective. I've heard it from the point of view of having everything ready to go. But you're right. I mean, by that stage, then you've lost all that time.
Yeah, I think specifically when it comes to recruiting for recruiting and trying to get your recruiting team, like getting them onboarded and set up and ready to go, I think you can get started on that earlier than you think sometimes. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, nice. Thank you for both sharing. So my next question is around strategic relationship building. So you both work, I understand you both work closely with finance and executive teams. How do you get yourself embedded in the budget conversations before those decisions are finalized? And what does that relationship building actually look like? Hebba, would you like to take this first?
Such a fun question. Like, I think HR and the finance should be best friends. Oftentimes, we're like pitted against each other because our incentive is different. Like, I am going to cost the company money, and the CFO and finance is just thinking, how do we save the money? And so that agitation can cause a lot of relationships to fail, I think. But HR leaders, especially as they're leading like talent teams and HR teams, need to understand the business, the cogs, the what the switches and the levers that we can turn on and off. And that means really having a good relationship with finance and a deep understanding of how does this company make money and burn money. And so how I've embedded myself in those conversations is simply by being a really good partner to finance. And I'm lucky that I have a great CFO who wouldn't dare go budget something without coming to talk to me about like what I think in the market this role would go for or what I think is reasonable or not reasonable. So we work hand in hand a lot of the time as we're talking through compensation for certain roles, or even as we did our benefits renewal, that was going to cost us money too. So, like talking through things like that. And I think we have just established a good relationship of we don't want each other's jobs, but we need to understand each other's jobs to do our own jobs better. So I would always say, like, come at it from a strategic perspective. Make sure you understand intimately your business, its cogs, and that way you can be a part of those conversations. And if all else fails, ask. I've been known to strong arm my way into many conversations, and that's okay if you're not being allowed in there. I think sometimes people need a little bit of a push, and you can do that to get into those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bit of a different perspective on this, and plus one though, Heba, to everything you said. I have a bit of a different role and perspective in this. I think something that I've seen work pretty well is more from the perspective of, I guess, um, you know, program managing or shepherding or kind of managing the rollout of a planning process more at scale is making sure that finance, recruiting, strategy and operations, like a lead or POC from each of those teams, and ideally with the leader, are all kind of in sync, in lockstep together. Whether it's, and they've been referred, that kind of group has been referred to, and we have different, I've seen different terminology for that kind of group of people. It's, they're like a magic circle, they're a great like quad or trio, right? But that group and that partnership is so important, and having them be in lockstep together from the very like early, like way before planning season even starts, but to get on the same page together and being in the room with them and making sure that they are, speaking the same language as much as possible, and then having them also influence their own leaders and carrying the same messages that they agree on together out to their own leaders and teams. That I have also seen work pretty well. But again, that's a bit of a, I don't know, a different angle on the question.
See, at
No,
scale.
yes,
Yeah.
as I say, this is
Like,
what you do at scale.
I have the luxury of like being at a small enough org where I like intimately know the hiring asks of every single person. I think your strategy, Renee, for like at scale is ideal when you cannot be in every conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm curious, Renee, with that point around it's the folks in the room to also then influence their teams or their leadership. Is that something that you've seen that has been driven from someone like you in a program manager role, or that is coming from the folks in the room?
A little bit of both, but I think it's really about, we want to make sure that finance, recruiting, the business leaders are all thinking about, for example, driving, how we're going to drive down, drive efficiencies through how, like, our location strategy, for example, and like making sure that that message is carried out, like, and like, yeah, just like shared out more broadly. But I think that I think it comes from a little bit of both, right? Like if there's a message that I need to, as a program manager, make sure that's carried out, like I can drop it into that group and then they can kind of cascade. And then sometimes, they are deciding on some sort of strategic narrative or a strategic like way that they want to approach something. And then they'll kind of go out and carry that message forward.
Right. Okay. So a bit of a responsibility on all parties in a way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So my next question is around data-driven planning frameworks, and this actually may speak to one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A chat. But let's talk about the actual frameworks and tactics you use. So what data and metrics are actually moving the needle when you're building your business case? How do you both think of that?
I think one that jumps to mind is, and Renee touched on this like very early on, is time to hire. Nobody seems to understand that you don't just like post a JD and then the job gets hired within like a week. Like there is a process, and like if you've recruited a role several times, you probably are sitting on a gold mine of data on how long it actually takes to hire that role. And I think when you show up in these conversations and they're like, oh, the business is on fire, we have to hire 10 salespeople and 6 engineers in the next month, you can literally say, okay, let's level set. Here's what's actually possible. Like, here's our average hire. Here are the things that are happening in the business that will slow us down. And so I love anchoring to that, because once I tell people like, oh, for a senior level role, it will take me anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. And like that is if we don't even like, we have to start the process now and get everything done before we can make that happen. So time to hire to me has been a massive unlock too, because hiring managers also aren't conceptualizing the time and effort it takes to hire someone.
Renee, any thoughts on this one?
I think some of the metrics that come to mind for me, cost per hire. I think that's it's a common term, right? Cost per hire, that I think finance, speaks that language with finance pretty well. I think some of the metrics that, again, will resonate and from finance are like any like ROI type of metrics or clear like cost per hire metrics.
Yeah. Cost per hire and time to hire. What about specific tactics that you use when you are thinking about that kind of planning process before you take it to the CFO or the COO? Is there anything that both of you are kind of thinking about?
I try not to scream. I like not to be like silly, but like I have to, because there are times in the planning process where I feel like my patience is so low that I have to like actively remind myself going into planning season every time, like I am the expert of my work, nobody else is. And so it is my job to bring them along with me on the journey. So when they say these things like, oh, we can just hire that person tomorrow, or, oh, like we'll build up that whole team by Q1, that I can level set my mind and not want to scream at them. And so I think like as a very impatient person, the tactic I use the most going into planning season is I remind myself that not everybody understands all the things that I do. I'm the expert of my work. And I actually try to document as many things as I can possibly document on like what it takes to build a JD, what an average interview process is, what it takes to make an offer, just so that I have documents on hand to just send to people to say, hey, like as we're going into planning season, here's some things you should know about our TA process. So aware that I can't make magic happen. So that's a silly one, but like I really do have to remind myself not to scream at people.
I don't think that's silly at all.
To be fair, I've never yelled at anybody at any company, but sometimes my frustration does wane during planning season more than other seasons.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's you're bringing the shift of perspective as well. It's like, how do you mentally look after yourself during planning season, not just what you do, but like how you do it as well, and make sure that you get through it in a way that's sane.
Yeah, and I think that that's also like, I think that many teams experience frustration throughout the planning process. Like And I don't know, we can maybe talk more about this, Heb. I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but like, you know, for many teams and organizations, like planning can feel like a one-time, like very onerous, like lift. And how can we, I would be curious to talk more about how to make it more agile, right? Heba, you had mentioned like quarterly, kind of more ongoing. But if we think about the spectrum of things, right, we kind of have like more of a continuous, ongoing, very agile, like kind of planning process, and then at the other end we have like this, like it's one time a year towards the end of the year as you look ahead to that, right? And where can we find like that middle ground? Because I know on the other end, if it's more of an ongoing, continuous thing, I've been in some teams that do that as well, and the feedback there has been, oh, it's too. It feels like it's all what we do, right? Like it feels like it's too time consuming, right? Like how do we make it not feel so? And so then they moved into like a two times a year type of timing. So I don't know if we want to go down that path and talk more about that. I don't want to like derail us, Leigh, but that's just something that we could also go down.
Let's definitely go down that path. I mean, it struck me when Hebba, you said planning every quarter. I'd love to understand like how you got there and what prompted that decision.
I feel like we plan honestly every week. It's like a new week where my CEO is like, what about these 5 roles? What about this? And I'm like, so I've worked at 4 early stage startups. So I thrive, I think, the best in chaos. So when I say things like we're quarterly doing headcount planning, we're talking about things week over week. The thing that I do the best at is I also go to my hiring managers and I make them aware that this is an iterative process and that our goal at the time is we have to best serve the business. And sometimes that involves people, sometimes that involves tools, and sometimes that involves things changing. And so as we're also hiring for a startup, like we like to really talk to our candidates about agility, flexibility, adaptability, because we are changing things in real time. And I really like to like make that clear to everybody who joins our organization. So us headcount planning every week, every month, honestly, it's like really in our DNA as a company at this point. Like the company has existed for 4 years. We have like a standing executive meeting every Thursday. Like we will talk about hires on that Thursday meeting, and then we'll talk about our headcount plan the entire week leading back up to the next Thursday meeting. And we have like, good tools in place where my CFO can scenario plan like impact to the business depending on how we change the headcount plan. Like if we move this role up, scale this one back, if we do this. So I'm really lucky in the sense that my team has that mindset already. Like we are a startup, we have to be iterative. We are trying to pivot to make sure that we can meet the moment at any time. And that does mean like headcount planning is very flexible. We tell all the hiring managers, like, you can always ask for a role. Will it get approved? Maybe not. Maybe it will, but you can ask at any time. And so far that has served. Again, we're 55 people. Like when we get to 100, maybe 150, the process might have more guardrails, but it's been working out really good for us because we're able to move very fast if we have to capitalize on a business opportunity. And like, I'll give you an example where we were hiring a product designer and we had one role only. We had another role slated later down in the quarter, and we got down to 2 final candidates, and we loved both candidates so much and actually saw that one candidate could do a lot of this other role that we were envisioning, that we decided to just hire both candidates and pivot, like move the role out even further down in the pipeline. So like maybe we won't even hire it because we managed to find 2 people who actually fit everything that we need and more. So we're able to do that. And I think like there's a lot of trust between our team that we are doing the very best for the business that we can do. And so I think that's kind of how we've done it. It's in our DNA. We trust each other to make good decisions, and we try to use our best judgment as an executive team.
Sounds like it's cultural, that idea of agility that's just extended, not just to like how you hire, but then how you plan as well.
We are rigid in nothing. Rigid would never be a word used to describe various processes we have at the startup, because I do believe when you end up being too rigid or too structured on some things, it can actually not incentivize the business well. But to be clear, our interview process is very structured. So like that is something that is interesting. Like I can be agile about the role. I will not let you come in here and wreck my interview process and add ridiculous stages with projects and like ruin the expectation for the candidate and make it inequitable. So there is like very interesting give and take with it too.
Hebba, would you say that because I think about planning as, what is our strategy? Like, what do we want to accomplish? What do we want to deliver? And then do we have the resources that we need to deliver on that strategy? Would you say that, like the strategy itself shifts, or is it more of like like that more stays more constant and stable, and then it's the head count and that's kind of ever changing and more agile?
Early in I think like in our second year of Workweek, and I joined like halfway through the first year, or like maybe less than a year before the company had hit a year. Our second year was one of like chaos, and I don't want to say the word turmoil because that feels dramatic, but we had a lot of shifting priorities because we were still trying to find the product market fit that everyone needs as like an early stage startup. In year 3, we kept talking about our word of the year. My CEO told everybody like the word of the year is focus. I'm not going to get distracted by shiny things. He's like, I do, and I don't want to, and we're going to focus. And we saw the impact so much in year 3, where that strategy stayed pretty stable. The headcount, definitely, we were flexible with, we were agile with what we want and need, but that strategy stayed pretty stable because we were so focused. And we went into year 4 with that same mentality. And so I think the business strategy does not change radically every quarter. Like we know what we're doing. It's the how you get there
Yes.
that I think should change, and it should change because I think like with AI, nobody would have predicted the way AI kind of blew up a lot of the things that we're experiencing in the workplace. If we had said like this is our strategy and we're going to do everything exactly this way, AI would have completely derailed us and disrupted us. But because we have that more agile, flexible mindset, we just rolled out AI initiatives very naturally in our org. We did power hours where we had people come and learn things. We had people share use cases, and it felt very natural rather than very disruptive. And I think it's because our strategy, we always have our North Star. How we get there should be different depending on the moment we're in. But again, I say that as an early stage startup. I'm not quite sure that that is the case at bigger stages, but we saw with a lot of the Amazon layoffs last year, one of the things they were citing was they wanted more flexibility. They wanted less managers that were creating processes, and they wanted to move like the early stage startup they were. And so I think there's something to be learned from structure and something to be learned from flexibility, but that all of us kind of chasing the same thing. We want to do work in interesting ways that like meet the moment and not outdated.
Yeah.
With that, Renee, I'm curious, given you're at Stripe and the scale of how you think about planning is a lot different to Hebba's, how are you thinking about planning as either, is it annual or are you moving to biannual? Kind of what is the cadence and the agility that you have built into your planning structure?
Yeah. So I don't think we're definitely, not in the level of agility that Hebba and the team are at. I think, it's interesting because I've worked in past orgs, for example, at Google that were not super small, but not super big either. And that was where they tested out some of the more agile planning approaches. And it went, I think that, I agree with many of the points that Heather made. I think that when you do take a more agile approach that way, it does lend lots of benefits, right? In being able to, um, um, adjust your hiring needs as priorities may adjust. I think it's just a matter of like making sure that things don't feel too like whiplashy for the teams. And also like to Hebba's point, like making sure that there's like that focus in place. And also just making sure that it doesn't feel too all encompassing, all consuming. But I think as orgs like grow and like get so much bigger in size, like you do, I think, have to move to more of a like typical is like the annual planning model
Yeah.
where you kind of look to the year ahead. And I would even say I've seen more and more now long range planning, right? And trying to look out like multi-year, like what do we want to accomplish? Like what is our long-term strategy? Um, and then, but I know that there are challenges with that as well, especially just with how quick and fast paced and how like just how dynamic the environment is today, especially with technology and AI. So it's difficult, but I have found that I think long range planning and thinking multi-year what you want to achieve, and then what headcount, what resource do you need next year to deliver on that, and kind of make that step towards that longer term vision is typically the approach that has worked. But again, it's interesting, and something that the team and I here, at least on the people team, are thinking about is like, how do we make it a little more agile though?
Yeah. We definitely have a 2027 and 2028 plan as well. But it was really funny because my CFO was like, yeah, I just threw random headcount in there just to like account for something. Like, we're definitely going to have to talk more when we get there. And I was like, yeah, obviously we're going to talk more when we get there. But it is something we also are trying. But I think for us, the execution of it, like there's always a plan, there's always a North Star. And we are all just aligned that like the execution might look different at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Agility,
Yeah.
I think, and adaptability are like two skills that I would like to see more employees like grow in. I think we're missing that at a lot of organizations. And it is a culture shock when people come to my org. And I know because I've seen the other orgs they've been at, and I've heard from how different we do things. But I think there's like so much of work that is going to change in the next 5 years that if we can also help our employees have that mindset shift as well, potentially the outcome will be even better for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we go on to talking about taking the plan to the CFO or the COO, I saw a great question in the chat around the tooling that you may be using to pull together the plan. So I'm curious, Hebba, you mentioned something about your maybe your CEO using a specific tool to plug in numbers. But what tools are you both using, either standard or maybe AI, that are helping with planning?
My God, I have planned in so many Google Sheets that I never want to see another Google Sheet for the rest of my life. But I will open a Google Sheet after this. Like I will absolutely be opening a Google Sheet after this. So there's that. My CFO uses Runway, where like once I give her my Google Sheet with like all the things, she'll put it all in Runway, and that actually helps her build the model. I know there are tools like ChartHop has a specific headcount planning module as part of their HRIS. And I think a lot of HRISs are adding headcount planning as a module. But I have found I have a lot of gripes with them. So I just end up doing it in Google Sheets.
Yeah, similar. I think it ends up oftentimes being quite spreadsheet based. So definitely, yeah.
Spreadsheet for the win. Okay. All right. So once you have your plan ready to go, now it's time to take it to the CFO, COO, or have in your case the CEO. I think this is where most plans kind of live or die. How do you both translate we need more recruiters or we need this technology into language that actually gets approved? What does that narrative, kind of a winning narrative, look like for both of you?
Yeah, I think it's always starting with like the why and like translating it into like business impact versus, not leading with, we need X recruiters, or and more about like what will we drop, or what will we not be able to accomplish if we don't take this action, or hire these folks, right? Like how I think sometimes like thinking about the inverse can be really helpful, of like what we'll lose or fail to achieve. And then also, yeah, like I said, like leading with the why, the business impact. What's the yeah, just like what is the efficiencies or the productivity or what's going to come out of this. I think that's always a good way to start. Hebba?
I love that. I was going to, sorry. Sorry. Wow.
Okay, you take your time. We'll all have a water break.
Terrible in my throat. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's in my throat right now. Okay, there we go. It's very dry where I am, so I'm like not really used to it. I have a whole set of cough drops next to me too. Okay. I love, Renee, what you said about storytelling, because I think we are trying to construct that narrative. You're trying to like bring people into the story you're telling. And I see a lot of HR leaders fail by not doing that at all. They just go in with like, this is what we need, and here's how I can make it happen. And it's like, no, what's the story? Like, does anyone else like love sports movies? I love a sports movie. And every time I'm watching, it's like they're assembling the team and they're bringing the team together, and then the team goes on to like greatness. I like think about that every time I go into one of these conversations, because I'm like, I must assemble my story in a way that like excites me and motivates me the same way a sports movie would. And I'm a Mighty Ducks diehard fan. Like, that's one of my favorite movie trilogies. So I'm always thinking about that. The second piece that I would add to the storytelling is you really have to know the person across the table from you and what they're incentivized by. And I think we forget that like CFO and CEO, COO, they all kind of might have different incentives or different ways of going to achieve the thing they're trying to achieve. And it's our job to like incept them, for lack of a better way of describing it. Like, I think manipulation for bad is bad. I think manipulation and influence for good is good. And so you should figure out who is across from you. What are they incentivized by? What's going to make their eyes light up? What's going to get them to hear you? And you need to paint the story in that way. And that means potentially you are prepping for 3 different conversations at any given time.
And potentially all at the same time.
You can, yeah. I do not believe you can rinse and repeat those types of conversations to get buy-in, because I think it'll fall flat. And if you're trying to get buy-in in a big group, like let's say I go to my exec meeting and it's all 5 of us and I try to get all 4 of their buy-in at once, it's not going to work. I probably have gone to each of them individually in a one-on-one, told the story, constructed the narrative, get to the broader meeting, and I'm like, here's the plan. We're all aligned. And it works out. So I think with your influence too as HR, like we know so much about the business, the people, our work. We're the experts, the masters of our own journeys. Like, we can use a lot of that to construct a narrative that is really strong.
I like the idea of like pre-wiring each of them individually as well. So when you come to that meeting, everyone's kind of signed off, or you understand where everyone stands, and you've spoken the language.
I will preview things with our CFO so often, despite having a strong relationship with my CEO and knowing I could go to him directly and ask for whatever I want. I have found more success with previewing it with her, making sure she and I are aligned. And now it's the 2 of us when we're talking to him, and he understands that all 3 of us are thinking the same thing.
Yeah, love that.
One question that I've seen some questions in the chat here as well is around just like trade-offs and making tough decisions and being disciplined as well in many of these like headcount discussions. And Hebba, maybe we can share a little bit of our thoughts there. I think especially when it comes to, I think someone had said it earlier, planning for support functions like the HR team, for example, or the people team, right? Like, oftentimes it's, how can you all be doing more with less, right, is the question. And how can you like how do we keep like headcount growth like very, very minimal, or like, keep costs down, right? And so I'm curious, like, Hebba, if you have any tactics or learnings that you've had. I think in my experience, some of the exercises that I've helped some of our people leaders kind of go through in this is, before we land at, we need X people to do this thing, like these are the gaps in terms of headcount that we need. It's like, well, what are the efficiency levers that we can pull to maybe stretch ourselves and maybe self-fund some of this work, or stretch some folks on the team to grow and build new skills and capabilities to be able to deliver on this. Like, that's some of the thinking that we try to, that I think that as stewards of the program, like, are accountable to do as well, and to influence our leaders to think about as well, is like, what should we deprioritize, or maybe move off, or delay? I think some of those things are just really important. Like, what can AI kind of help us achieve instead, right? Like, I think those are some questions that it's good to push leaders to think about before just like, we need more people.
Throwing bodies at a problem. I don't want to be so dramatic when I say this, but like, I rarely see it work well. It ends up being either then we've overhired, or it's too many people trying to solve a very specific problem. We didn't set expectations correctly, which we all know, like, failure is expectation setting. Like, we just don't do it well as a society and as hiring managers. Like, we have to all get better at it. But the throwing bodies at a problem, like, I always approach a problem with like very curiosity. Like, everyone knows I'm going to ask about 6 million questions before we wrap something up. If it's something that's like timely, I'll like keep my questions like 3. If it is something that we have like more of a runway on, I will ask like at least 60. And how I have done this in the past is, when people want to throw bodies at the problem, I will go deep with them on like, explain to me what you're experiencing. How is this manifesting in your day-to-day work? What is a priority? And I always talk about, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the year my CEO pitched the word as focus, and then rolled into the second year, was also like another year of focus. I was like, I'm so proud of this man. Like, he really understands. Like, we tried to do a lot, and we were excited by all the things we were doing, but it's really hard to be successful if you're trying to do everything. And so even going back and level setting with the leaders, like, the deprioritizing conversation is really scary for people, because they don't want to say like, oh, I can't achieve that. Everyone feels like they should be able to achieve everything. I just come at it from a very realistic perspective, where I'm like, you cannot have 5 goals. You should probably have 1 to 3. Like,
Mm-hmm.
5 is a lot. Like, you're never going to get to 5. I'm never going to get to 5. It's just too much. And that kind of realism of level setting and talking more about priorities and urgency, I think, starts the hiring conversation already on a different foot. Because then they're like, oh, well, if I don't have to do this thing, and it's not mission critical, and it doesn't actually, that doesn't actually impact this company goal. We have 3 of them, and this thing that I'm trying to do doesn't impact any of those 3. Why am I doing it? Now I don't need that headcount. And you can have a real conversation about, can we augment and support you with the tool? Anything is cheaper than hiring someone.
Yes.
Anything
Mm-hmm.
is cheaper. And like, a lot of hiring managers just think in terms of base salary. And so even talking to them about, like, it's not just base salary, it's like benefits. It's also like employer tax. Like, there's so much that goes into the total cost of an employee, where what you think could be a 100K salary is actually closer to 120.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get this tool for $30,000 that does everything you want it to do. Let's look at the trade-off there. And so I think, like, bringing in the managers and the leaders into the conversation, where they can actually control their destiny by helping them understand the levers, has been really powerful for me personally.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add that I think sometimes it can be more of a time investment to think about how your teams are delivering against different priorities, right? Who's delivering on what, right? But if you jump straight to, what are the incremental investments and headcount that I need, and you don't do that exercise of like understanding how your current workforce and current body of people are like delivering, like, I think that can sometimes lead to the outcomes that you described, Hebba, right? Like bloated orgs, things like that.
Yeah.
So I would just, it's difficult, but I think that it's necessary.
Also,
it's kind of
the thing
taking.
I would say is, the thing I will say is, like, not everybody can show up to a conversation and answer questions on the spot and be able to like articulate all their thoughts. So something that I've seen work really well with my hiring managers is, I give them like 5 questions. When they're like, oh, I think I need to hire someone, or oh, I need this. I'm like, okay, before we even have that, I need you to think about these 5 things. And one of them is like, could this problem, the problem you're facing, could it be solved with a tool? And I just see what they say. And like those conversations are meant to prepare them so that when they come to me, they've already done the pre-thinking and articulation of what is this role? What do I need? And sometimes they come back and are like, actually, I don't need that. And I'm like, excellent. Then I've just like solved and saved so much time. But I think like the more work we do as a society to like write down our thoughts and think critically about the problems at hand and create space for managers to do that, the better we can actually plan. No
Mhm.
one is going to jump into a plan and be ready to do everything and answer every question. Like I can't just Slack Renee and be like, jump on this planning call with me. And suddenly Renee and I leave in an hour and we've planned out the whole world. Like it doesn't work like that. So I think the more you can send your hiring managers ahead of time, 3 to 5 questions can really reshape the conversation too and save you time.
Nice. I like that. Love that idea actually of the pre-work that folks could do before they even get to you and then have that conversation. Somewhat adjacent to that is a great question in the chat that we'll pull up now. It's around how can we effectively plan during uncertain situations such as geopolitical tensions or an economic slowdown that may or may not impact the company's revenue. How do you both kind of weave that into the planning cycle as well? Not a straightforward question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I was reading myself because I was like, "Ooh."
Yeah.
I don't think I have a good answer. I will say, okay, this is one thing I do, and this is a little bit, I don't think it's a best practice, and I'm not really sure I would recommend it, but I do it. I create like 3 iterations of the plan. It's like, here's if everything is status quo and goes great. Here's if tomorrow I like do a version where like, here's if tomorrow we lose half our customers and whatever X, Y, and Z happens. The third plan is like, here's what happens if my top performers leave. Because I think a lot of succession planning can also be done as part of planning, but not enough people incorporate succession planning into headcount planning. And that I think helps calm me down. I don't know if it's like a best practice though that I would recommend everyone do because it's a little bit intense and I just do it to like soothe my nerves on what if I wake up tomorrow and the world dramatically looks different.
Mhm.
So scenario planning
Yeah,
for the
I was gonna say scenario planning in my experience has worked pretty well. Like I think it helps teams feel like we have a plan in the event of different scenarios or different outcomes. And so I've seen like, okay, if we were to get X amount of heads or Y amount of heads or Z amount of heads, like what we would be able to do and what we wouldn't be able to do in each of those scenarios. I don't know if that's directly answering this question around like geopolitical and economic, but I don't know, maybe there's something there or some sort of takeaway there that can apply.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing, ladies. I have one final question, and then we're going to go back to the questions in the chat. So everyone in the audience, if you have any other burning questions, we've got about 12 minutes or so please pop that in. But when we think ahead to 2026 and the key trends that are shaping 2026, what are top TA leaders prioritizing and planning for right now? And what's one area most organizations may be underestimating?
Oof. Ugh. This is so hard. Top TA priorities. I feel like everyone's going to say AI.
I was just gonna say that.
AI.
I think like how it's being embedded, how to embed it within the end-to-end, flow, all the way from like sourcing all the way through to onboarding even, right? Like, and how that like, frees up more time for recruiters, right? And how that then will enable them to have maybe more strategic, like focusing on, some of the strategic relationship building or other parts of the process that they just weren't able to do before without some of the AI support. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else, Hebba.
I mean, like the AI to improve recruiter efficiency, like
Yeah.
breaks my heart, but it is like the most use case, like the do more with less really does trigger me. I'm like, no, that's not fair. Like no other team is asked to do more with less than HR. I actually think next year a lot of teams are going to be asked to do more with less. And when they feel the pain, I'm going to be like, welcome. Welcome to what it has felt like in HR, where you have to like beg, plead, cry for budget before everybody else gets it. And then you get it as an afterthought. So I think that do more with less could really get up there. Somebody put in the chat curiosity. I absolutely agree that will be a top skill in 2026. It's actually one of my 3 core values. One of 3 of my core values is curiosity. I think like helping people get really curious about the world, the people doing the jobs, even alternative job paths. Like I think jobs will look different in the future. And so getting your TA team comfortable with uncertainty and curiosity could be what unlocks you from finding like really talented people you otherwise wouldn't have even considered. And I think like the last thing that most orgs underestimate, you asked that, Leigh, and I feel like we have to talk about it, is the fact that AI isn't like replacing as many jobs yet. And so I think a lot of us went into this year like all those scary headlines that were like, AI is going to take your job is going to be completely different. I mean, I do think we're underestimating, or maybe it's actually overestimating what AI will do. I think it'll be a slower crawl in the next 5 years where we'll see things slowly change. And one thing I have done internally is all of our JDs this year, by the end of this year, all of our existing job descriptions, we review them once a year annually. Every manager has to look at every single job description of every person on their team to make sure it still meets the work they're doing. But something I'm adding this year is a component of what percentage of this job is done or is leveraged can be leveraged by using AI, so that all of our job descriptions moving forward have a component where it's like 70% human work, 30% AI. And then we can get even better at planning what future hires look like for, when that 30% becomes 50 or becomes 60, where are we thinking that person goes in the succession planning stuff?
Another trend that's coming to mind for me is I think that there's going to be a lot of investment in just data foundations and focusing on like the infrastructure of and making. I think oftentimes like these teams start so small and like they go bigger and bigger, and just investing in strong data foundations and having that be kind of like the fabric of how things operate. I think that is going to be a big investment and a big trend in the next year or so.
Right, data foundations, which ultimately I imagine will then help with planning in the future as well. You've got that clean data to be able to make informed decisions.
Yes, because I think oftentimes these teams like finance, HR, like we'll all kind of like build our own dashboards and our own tools and systems. They don't often, like sometimes they won't speak to each other, right? And so I've seen that in my experience a lot as well, as like, they have different, like these metrics are pulled from different sources and these systems just don't talk to each other. And so I think that there's going to be a push for, of course it depends on the stage of the org and where the org is at, but I think that just investing in one clean system is going to solve a lot of the friction that happens, especially in planning.
And brings those teams together.
100%.
Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and those fabulous nuggets. There are a number of questions in the chat, so we may let's jump over to those in our final 6 minutes. Anintha writes, there is so much reading material about this topic. Are there any specific templates or starting points for us to be able to start the conversation to do headcount planning that you can share or you can reference?
I don't have one, but I just actually wrote down a takeaway for me to like build a template to share it with people, because I don't have one right now. I kind of just roll in with like my annual plan that I keep using, and it looks different depending on who I'm talking to, which is not great. So I could find something.
Yeah, I've seen many different templates in my experience. I think, I think usually it kind of starts with like, if we're talking more on the strategy side of like strategy templates to kick off planning, is like, what is the like longer term vision, right? And kind of like adding that in, articulating that, and then having teams kind of articulate like, okay, what are the OKRs or the objectives and key results deliver on that, right? And then kind of backing into, okay, what is the resourcing that's needed in that? And kind of, I've seen some simple tables that kind of list out like level, row location, et cetera. And then of course there's like much more detailed like headcount management spreadsheets and things like that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. A variety of different tools out there. Mm-hmm. The next question takes us back to when we were talking about the metrics and the data. The question is around along the lines of level setting time to hire with hiring managers. How are you defining cost per hire for 2026 when faced with a lot of unpredictables or unknown variables? Inflation, return to the office versus remote, cost impact of more AI tools, etc.
Renee, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert on this, that's for sure. I think
either.
I think that this is a difficult one. I know that there's also there's cost per hire, there's cost per head, right? And I know that those are different. But I'm not an expert here, but I agree that there's a lot of difficult variables that you have to take into account when thinking about cost per hire. Hebba, do you have more familiarity with this?
Yes, I would actually, this is so funny. I would ask my CFO to figure it out for me. I would go to her and say, this is a thing I want to measure. Like, do you have a calculation? Like, is that baked in somewhere? What can we do together? And she and I would probably work on what that number looks like. We have cost per hire. I'm not sure what factors actually go into it. So if I were to like incorporate data, tools, everything, I would probably go to her first as like my math person.
Yeah.
I like math. I think she does math better. So we will probably just go to her.
We'll defer to the expert on that one.
I'll defer to the expert on math because it is not my favorite subject. So
Sounds great. Now, I think that looks like we've covered most of the rest of the questions as we have been chatting. So how about let's wrap it up with one final question for the both of you. For TA leaders who haven't started or are late in the process, what's one high impact step they can still take this quarter to set themselves up for success?
I'll go back to this. I said this earlier, but I really do believe it. You have to understand how your business makes money. I'm not expecting you to be the expert. Like I used to work at a fintech company. Like I was not expecting myself to be the expert on everything fintech, but I needed to understand what our cogs were, because then you can understand the levers you can and cannot pull. And when you speak the language of the business, you are able to better set yourself up for success. I have just seen so much get better with every conversation I have with people when I can talk about the business itself.
Completely agree. I think for me, like the one concrete step or tangible action I'd recommend is reaching out, tying in with your finance person, get finance, maybe connect with like a strategy and operations person, going back to like that trio or that magic circle of folks that I talked about earlier, is like tying in with them, and then I also think tying with like your business leaders on what do we want to accomplish next year, and are we resourced to effectively deliver on it? I think like getting those questions out there and asking the right people. I think I don't think it's ever too late to do that.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And ladies, thank you for a wonderful conversation. So my takeaways here were that start the planning process early and think about it often. If you can be agile and build that into the way that your organization thinks about planning, take that route. And if not, give yourself plenty of runway. Build those relationships with your stakeholders so you're very clear on kind of what's important to them, and you're pre-wiring your findings and your frameworks with them as well. So when you land in and you're presenting that to the CEO, the CFO, etc., everybody is on the same page. So ladies, again, thank you very much for your time. Great conversation. For everyone in the audience, feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn and follow up with us there if you have any additional questions. But thank you everyone for your time and for joining today. And we'll see you all for the next GEM event.
Thank you for having us. This was amazing.
Thank you. Yes, it was so fun. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the great questions too.
Bye, all.
Bye.